What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Crash Bandicoot 5 yet again, and this time just ask the question of what's the likelihood, what are the odds, and what kind of has to go right now in order to get this game. So this is based off of the, I guess, assumption, but you could say the rumor, the leak, right, that there was a Crash 5 years ago, granted, right, years ago, that was canceled. And it seems believable because the same guy, talks about the next project he worked on for years, and he had concept art and all that jazz. And, Crash seems to be under some sort of NDA thing, so you're probably not going to hear about it for a while. But, as we speculated, or at least I speculated, this has to have been before Team Rumble, right? I imagine Crash 4 came out, and then the pitch was maybe for Crash 5. Maybe they started, whatever. Maybe because of how Activision works internally, which I'm not a big fan of, live service, whatever it might have been, we get to Team Rumble. And Team Rumble didn't work. I like the game, but it just did not work in terms of players. And here we are now with Toys for Bob being, shipped out or, doing their own thing, which I definitely support that move. And maybe working on like a Spyro game. Now that's important, right? Because now we ask ourselves the question, all right, would they ever give Crash another try? And again, God, I hope so, because this is one of the most important franchises to my life. We fought so hard for years to get this game back, and then when we did get it back, I think we supported it as a fandom about as well as we could have. I think that's what's so frustrating to people is the Insane Trilogy did 20+ million units, right? That is incredible, and that does not happen for most games. It really, really doesn't. That's a small percentage. So we did about as well as we could. Team Racing did pretty well when they remade that, and even Crash 4 over 5 million units. 5 million for a brand new game in a franchise that's 25+ years old and different team. And I think I really like Crash 4. I don't think it's my favorite, but it's definitely, I think, a really good game. And 5 million, that's nothing to scoff at. That's really, in my opinion at least, maybe not Activision, but that's a really good number. And again, that also kind of connects to it, right? So I think you have two problems here, okay? Number one is you don't really have any teams that can do it. And I would say that if you follow the rumor that Toys for Bob is doing Spyro, right? Now, you might get Crash after Spyro, and the best case scenario, I would say, is just have Toys for Bob, even though they're independent, right? Clearly, they love the franchises of Crash and Spyro, and they've proven that time and time again, right? If they are doing a Spyro 4, takes them 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, and they work with Microsoft because, you have to work with them with the right stuff, could Crash be after that? Yes, but now you're looking at, oh my God, you're looking at probably 7 to 10 years until you get a new Crash game. Maybe not until it's announced, but until you actually get it released, you'd be looking at almost a decade, which is unbelievable. Unbelievable that we fought so hard to get it reduced to something like that. And sticking, I guess, with the developer issue, right? The thing is, you could have a new developer do it, but you're always rolling the dice. And granted, franchises do this kind of all the time, and it works out probably more than it doesn't work out, but you are rolling the dice, and you're always trying now. You have to keep finding people that are respectful of what Crash was and able to translate it into a new thing now. Do you maybe go back and do another remake to get your feet wet to then make a brand new? I don't know. You know what I mean? That's another thing where it's Toys for Bob kind of had an initiation kind of ceremony, right? Where they had to work at it. Maybe not had to, but they did. And I think that probably helped them. And you'd have to do a case study on that where it's if you find a new studio, can they just jump right in and make Crash 5? Or do they have to make a remake first to kind of get used to it and then do a Crash? I don't know, the answer to that. I think getting that experience is probably something that's good, more good than bad, right? But, even right there, that would take even longer because if you're trying to find a different studio, you'd have that. The biggest issue, that's number one, but I guess the biggest of these two is number two, is the money. And when I think about the money, you can't help but think of what Activision has been doing. And I think that's the biggest roadblock in the way, of Crash 5. Because although what I said in the beginning of this video was, I guess, general speculation, I feel like it sounds right. You know what I mean? If he's telling the truth and there was a Crash 5 canceled, it was probably right after Crash 4. Crash 4 comes out. It does pretty good. It obviously doesn't do as good as the Insane Trilogy. Again, it settles at about 5 million units now. So, it took some years. And you imagine they pitched 5, they started 5, whatever it might be, and then they started to do Team Rumble after that. Now, the biggest question I would then have is why did they do Team Rumble. And I mean, we've always kind of had this question of like, why does Team Rumble exist? I've got to imagine it's because of the live service type elements where, making a Crash game a live service game doesn't sound like it's going to work, and ultimately it really didn't work, right? But, maybe it's something that Activision pushed on them, whatever it might be. I have to imagine that was like a fallback plan where it's like, well, we want to do Crash 5, and then Activision says, well, we like Crash, and Crash generally does do well, but we can't really do a Crash 5, but maybe if you try like a cheaper live service thing, if that works, maybe you can spin it afterwards to a Crash 5, right? Do Crash 5 after. So, I mean, again, these are things that I don't fully know, but you got to imagine it gets there somehow. You know what I mean? So, to me, money is probably an issue because you didn't do a Crash 5 yet, right? Like, if Crash 5 was so possible, it probably would have already been done. There's a reason, in my opinion, that the next Crash game after Crash 4 was a live service, kind of battle royale. I mean, it didn't actually have, and I remember them saying this in interviews, right? Didn't really have a genre. That probably didn't help them, but it, didn't really fit in any specific genre. But money had to contribute to that. So to me, that is the scariest thing, especially as we continue to live in this era where games do generally, right, cost more and more and more, take more and more time, but also that risk factor, companies want to eliminate risk like whenever possible, right? So if there's even a shot that the game wouldn't work or wouldn't make its money back, the odds of it happening aren't very high. And, it's something we talk about on this channel so much for Sly Cooper, right? Like Sly Cooper, when you really get down into it, like, it is a hard sell. Even as somebody is much of an optimist and such as a diehard Sly fan as me, like, you have to imagine, you pitch it, but it takes so many years, takes so much money, and what if it doesn't work? Crash isn't as bad. Crash is more established even in the modern day than Sly Cooper is, right? But it still does have, I think, a little bit of like uncertainty from, and this is the most important thing, from the rights holder. The only other way to do it, right? Like maybe the best case scenario is you find a team or you find some situation where they negotiate the rights. They don't have to buy the rights, but you almost like rent it out, right? And much like if Toys for Bob is doing a Spyro game, they've done something, right? Where Toys for Bob is independent, but they're paying Microsoft however much money to use Spyro, right? You basically would do that exact same thing for Crash. That is, in my opinion, the quickest way and the safest way and the way of going around all of the kind of garbage that's like laid out in front of you. That's the best way around it, right? Because you're taking your own risk. And so you have to find now a company or a team or whatever that is willing to take a risk, right? And that could be very difficult. That might not exist. But Toys for Bob's doing it. So, like, can there be one? Is there one team out there or one smaller publisher or entity or whatever that's willing to take a shot, willing to pay the price with Xbox? Because, this is something that I think Xbox kind of needs to do. It's something I think PlayStation should somewhat be open to as well. So say with a game like Sly or Jack and Daxter or whatever, is you work with them, they give you some tips and tricks, you pay them some money, you use the rights, and you make the game. That, to me, is the best case scenario. So do I think it's likely? As I said when we talked about, Crash being canceled or whatever, I think we haven't seen the end of him. I just can't imagine. Like, it is still successful. It is. And 5 million might not be as successful as they wanted. And we don't even know that, right? But it still is. That's a lot. Crash has enormous power, which is rad, by the way. He has enormous power to this day. So I just can't imagine it forever being gone. So I do think we'll get it back, or I think it'll be back. It's just, how does that actually play out? We went over some examples in this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.